Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, what impact will the federal shutdown have on Maryland? Should Montgomery County continue funding the Maryland Israeli Development Center? And an immigration judge denies Kilmar Abrego Garcia's bid for asylum. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by attorney and former House of Delegate member Marice and Jackie Sackstein, Maryland Young Republican chairman. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. According to the Baltimore Sun, a federal government shutdown would rattle Maryland's economy as more than 100,000 workers in the U.S., many from this state, have formally left their jobs this past Tuesday under a deferred resignation plan. According to Max Stier, president and CEO of Partnership for Public Service, the timing of the federal government shutdown, coupled with a massive worker exodus that happened last Tuesday, creates a double-barreled issue with government services that people rely on. Marice, Maryland has lost over 15,000 federal jobs this year, the most in the nation. And with the shutdown now in effect, the stakes couldn't be higher for our state's workforce. Do Democrats bear any responsibility for tying healthcare subsidies to the shutdown negotiations instead of just passing a clean funding bill?
Absolutely not. Part of being a politician, unfortunately, is the symbolism behind using your position to stand up for the American people. And when this happened during the Obama years, of course, Trump was on Fox and Friends, talking about how this is an issue for the president to take responsibility over, to bring people together and know how to lead and negotiate a deal. Well, at this point, his party, under his leadership, has the whole responsibility. They are holding the American people hostage. They know what they're doing. And ultimately, in January, when this bill passes anyway, the American people will at least know that the Democrats stood up for what's right. And that is, it is inhumane to live in 2025 in the United States of America, a leading nation, where already healthcare costs are astronomical. And on top of that, this bill would make it even worse for states like the state of Maryland that have historically received subsidies that allow for Marylanders to have access to the Affordable Care Act, for example, and go into the Maryland Health Exchange and purchase affordable health care. And so this bill would make it even worse. And that, to me, is a betrayal to the American people, no matter what party you're a member of.
Well, I don't want to challenge you on this, other than to say that, 6 months ago, the Democrats agreed to what they called a clean resolution extending the budget, and also many of the things that you've talked about in terms of emergency funding for health care that occurred during the COVID days were set to expire this December. So it seems that the Democrats want to add over $1 trillion to the budget, and when we really need to be looking at a rollback on our budget.
I stand on my position, Casey. I hear you. And at the end of the day, these are tactics, and you have to be able to understand the rules of the game to be able to stay in the game. And at this point, Democrats don't have any other card to play, and they can't just blink an eye, acquiesce, and roll over for the Republican-held Senate, House, and obviously the White House, because it's a moment in our history that it's not just like any other government shutdown. This is a significant set of cuts that are underway, in addition to all the cuts that we've already had in the state of Maryland.
Okay, well, let's see what Jackie has to say on this. And Jackie, Marice is quite right. Maryland stands to lose over $700,000 a day in revenue during the shutdown, and aren't, Republicans shutdown tactics, reckless for our state? And, Governor Moore says this is cruelty to Maryland taxpayers. Is he right?
So I would start by saying what's going on with Maryland in particular has been a ticking time bomb for quite some time, right? Maryland has for too long depended too heavily on federal jobs to sustain its economy. And now we're seeing that ticking time bomb finally blow up. And that's something that we've been talking about for a long time. Governor Moore has said it, Governor Hogan has said it, that we need to do better at bringing in private sector jobs to the state because we can't be at the whim of the federal government to keep our economy going. It's just not plausible. In terms of this being cruelty on the Republican part, I completely disagree. I think Marice, obviously, I disagree with you completely. We only need 5 Democrats to vote with us to overcome the filibuster to keep the government funded. This is the Democrats who are the ones holding it up. All the Republicans voted, except for the exception of one, and I understand why, to keep the government open, to keep these things going. The same exact CR, in fact, that all of the Democrats voted for under Chuck Schumer's leadership in the Senate and back earlier this year, right? If they had just voted for the clean CR, then we could be having these conversations and debates about healthcare funding in the 12 weeks that we have to pass all of the appropriations bills. But instead, it's the Democrats who are holding the American people hostage by refusing to pass the clean CR and opening up the government so that we can continue to have those debates.
We've got, there's also a different element here that, I described to someone yesterday that this is like the third or fourth sequel of an action movie that we've, seen before. And we know the plot so well because it's just a repeat of what's been done before. But this time is a little different. This time the administration is actually threatening to have a reduction in force for the civil workforce because they're trying to reduce a bloated federal bureaucracy. So Marice, are Democrats falling into a trap here that they may in the long run lose more positions because of their determination to fight against the administration?
At the end of the day, as I mentioned from the beginning of this discussion, the American people are looking to their elected officials to stand up for their rights, for their entitlements, for what their taxes should be paying for. And the reality is, since the 1990s, we've had 8 government shutdowns. 4 have been presided by President Trump. That is not a coincidence. That is by design. We've never seen a president use the government shutdown against its own people. It's usually Congress that is stuck in these rules and the filibusters, et cetera. But this executive is using every member of his party to control how his big ugly bill, which is what I would like, actually passes, and it's to continue to put money into the pockets of his billionaire friends against the working and middle class Americans. That's the bottom line of that.
Jackie, I'll give you about 20 seconds to respond if you want to.
Yeah, I would say Trump has definitely maneuvered the Democrats into a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. But I do think that there is something to be said for having to take this measure to get rid of this bloated bureaucracy, as you said, that we've been trying to get rid of. That's been a hallmark of Trump's agenda since he's been running and has been in office. And I think that it is a great opportunity for us to take advantage of this shutdown to actually get done what needs to be done in order to save the country's budget in the long term.
Well, I was going to ask you both how long you predicted the shutdown would last, but we've run out of time for this segment. We have to move on. So I will respond. Too long. I think this shutdown is unnecessary, and I think both sides are a little dug in on their positions. But that's that topic is for another day. Now let's focus on Montgomery County and what's happening here in Montgomery County. It's a very unusual situation. Montgomery County provides funding to the Maryland Israeli Development Center, a partnership designed to foster trade between Maryland and Israel. But critics, including CARE and former delegate Saeed Ali, are calling for the county to end that funding, citing ties to defense contractors and Israelis' actions in Gaza. Jackie, the state of Maryland and the nation of Israel have had a very successful program of joint research and development of useful technology that has benefited our economy here in Maryland. But the growing Democratic opposition to Israeli policies, should Montgomery County consider changing its relationship with the partnership?
Absolutely not. I mean, CARE has been known to be incredibly anti Semitic for several years, and I've felt that personally as a Jewish resident of the county and the increasing anti Semitism that's taken place here. And tying back to what we were just talking about with the shutdown and the economy in Maryland, part of what this relationship does is help bring in private sector jobs into the state of Maryland. I really don't think we can afford to be throwing away opportunities to bring in non-federal government jobs to the state, especially because even though, Governor Moore has been trying with all these international trips he's been taking to bring jobs to the state, I don't think he's been as successful as he had hoped.
So, Marice, obviously there's a push to question whether or not this funding should be continued. But Montgomery County bills itself as the biotech, center for the nation, and many of these jobs, these high tech jobs, are in cyber and biotech that come directly from this partnership between the state of Maryland and the nation of Israel. So Montgomery County has benefited. Should we reconsider that relationship?
At the outset, I would like to say that any statements that I make have nothing to do with my feelings towards the Jewish people. I have been friends of, supported by, etc. But what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. There are at least, I want to say, 400 individuals that are being detained right now, humanitarian individuals who have reached the waters of Gaza with humanitarian aid, and the Israeli military has turned them away or detained them. That said, I don't believe that any kind of investment that brings jobs to the county have to do with this issue. Now, I commend individuals who use their freedom of speech to want to say, listen, my tax dollars should not be going into this purpose or that purpose. And I have a lot of respect for former delegate Sackstein Ali, and his role in this debate. Because if it weren't for individuals who are willing to speak up for what they believe is right, we wouldn't even be having this debate. So I don't believe that taking away jobs or investing in the biotech corridor of the county is the way to fix the genocide that's happening in Gaza. And just also to point out that I'm proud of Democratic leaders who have also used their platform to speak up on what's happening in Gaza, like Senator Kristen Holland, Senator Angela Alter-Brooks, and Congressman Jamie Raskin.
Okay, so I guess, Jackie, the question is the debate a useful debate, and is that part of what we do as a democracy?
Well, I think any debate is a useful debate as long as we can come together and have civil discourse. I think a lot of what's been happening in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination has really highlighted this need for civil discourse and being able to agree to disagree, which is part of why I love doing this show and love seeing, the efforts to make that happen across the country.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I would say on that alone, this debate is absolutely necessary. And to Marice's point, anybody should be able to use their First Amendment rights to speak up on what they believe in, whether we agree or disagree on it. That's part of what makes this country great.
Thank you. And thank you both. When we come back from this short break, immigration is never far from the headlines. And now one Maryland case, again, is making national news. Stay tuned. And welcome back. The controversial case of a Maryland man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is married with an American with children here in Maryland, took another turn this week as Abrego Garcia was denied asylum by an immigration judge. Abrego Garcia is originally a Salvadoran native. His case has become a flashpoint. Critics call him a victim of Trump immigration crackdown, while DHS labels him a gang member and a predator who must be removed. Now, Marice, Is this a case of how the Trump administration weaponizes immigration law to demonize individuals without legal status?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is my what I'm doing, what I'm working on every single day on hearings on detained Marylanders who have no criminal history. They may have a blemish for a DUI, um, and that's about it. And what happened to Kilmar Abrego Garcia is is inhumane. And I want to commend Senator Chris Van Hollen for personally making the trip to El Salvador. And this is coming from a delegate that was called. I was what do they call me? They call me a radical. The Baltimore Sun called me a radical a couple times when I was just simply making constitutional arguments like those that Senator Chris Van Hollen has finally made somewhat mainstream. So I think the only silver lining from these numerous violations on due process rights of all individuals. So the Constitution says it plain and clear: any individual on American soil has the right to due process. It does not matter if they're undocumented or not. Now, depending on whether you have some kind of status, you have a right to a bond hearing, or you have a right to appeals, or other types of due process. But the basic constitutional rights given to any detained individual on American soil is that to be heard by an impartial judge. And at this point, these are not impartial judges. Let it be very, very clear that the judge, the federal judge in Kilmar's case, is falling in line with the Trump administration. These are DOJ employees who are either, they're up to basically they can either implement the rule of law or face losing their tenure, losing their jobs. And we're already seeing that effect in the low level immigration judges, even just in the DMV. I'm having, and it's already increasing the backlog on top of the backlog that already existed,
All right,
where we
Marice,
have, yes,
I'm sorry. I want to give Jackie
please
a
go
chance
ahead.
here.
Go ahead.
I mean, admittedly, there is a question. I mean, Mr. Abrego Garcia did go before immigration judges in the past, and his status was questionable, and he was trying to appeal that. So, I grant your concern about the civil liberties of people, but there are instances, and we have an instance in Iowa where Ian Roberts, who had been who was the superintendent of schools in Iowa, had overstayed his visa, and the federal government does have a right to enforce immigration laws. So, Jackie, just talking about the Garcia case for a second, there are those who think he has gotten his due process, and it's time to move on. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we could have an entire show just talking about, the political biases of federal judges, the lawfare that's been thrown at the Republicans and President Trump, but we'll save that for another day. But I do think at this point, Kilmar Abrego Garcia has had his due process. And I also think that his lawyers overplayed their hand. If you'll recall, I think it was about a month ago, his lawyers put a list of, it was like 20 countries. He cannot be deported to these countries because he is at risk there. I'm like, okay, well, you're from El Salvador. I feel like you probably have not been to all 20 of these countries. So this is really just trying to put up roadblocks and in a way that is, he's clearly not going to be persecuted in a bunch of these random countries in Africa that he's never been to. And I know they just changed the order that he's going to now be going to Uganda and not Eswatini as they had decided after they sent that list of 20 countries. They're like, all right, how about this country you've never heard of? So, yeah.
So, I mean, this is a complicated case, Marice, and I want to speak in general, about the immigration enforcement effort. Is what's being done. Obviously, you feel like it's unfair. Is there a fair way to enforce our immigration laws?
Absolutely. It's broken. There is no fair way, or even just blankly stated way to become somehow documented in this country, unless you fall into four very specific buckets. And even those buckets, you have to wait 12, 15 years just for that visa to become available. And so when you understand how broken the system is, you know that it's done by design. It is done by design. And anybody who is most people that even have status today, including the First Lady, have overstayed a visa because the system itself makes it so that individuals fall out of status while they're waiting for for an immigrant visa to become available. And that is even with the highest priorities, which is a U.S. spouse or a child of a U.S. citizen. You're still waiting in line for years and years and years. And so, Congress has, not just Congress, but the American people, we've benefited from, labor, from cheap labor. And so then it's by design, unless we can, correct the break in the system, you're always going to have individuals who are going to risk their lives to be able to come to this country.
Thank you, Marice. You're absolutely right. It's a wonderful country to be a part of when you're here legally. And Jackie, I'll give you the last word. Isn't this fundamentally about the federal government's ability to control our national borders?
It absolutely is. Without borders, we don't have a country. And I completely agree with Marice that we do need to do better with reforming our immigration system so it's not taking years and years for people who want to go about it the right way and come here legally. But until that time, we do need to abide by our laws. And the other thing is, we already have so many people in this country, American citizens, who are homeless, who are struggling. Until we can properly take care of the people we already have, I don't think it benefits us to keep overfilling our country with more people. We need to make sure we want people to come here and live the American dream. And I think that we need to be able to take care of the people we have before we invite more people here.
Well, thank you both. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from the short break. And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Marice Morales.
I just want to encourage the American people to stand up to what's blatantly happening in front of our eyes, and that is schemes of an individual who is trying to become an authoritarian leader of this country, and that is against every democratic value that we as Americans believe in. If you see something wrong, stand up, whether it be in public, at a restaurant, speak up for those who can't.
Thank you, Marice. Jackie Sackstein, your parting shot.
I want to take two different paths. The first one, reiterating what I said about having discourse, having civil debate. Don't be afraid to talk to each other, but also don't be afraid to agree to disagree. I think we need more of that in this country to really bring down the rhetoric and the political violence that we've been seeing going on. The other is just to highlight, if people didn't see, yesterday was Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day in the Jewish year, and there was a terrorist attack in London at a synagogue. A friend of mine, his brother actually attends that synagogue. Fortunately was not there that day, was out in the country. But the hate against Jewish people needs to stop, regardless of what your opinion is on the war going on in the Middle East, which, God willing, Hamas accepts the deal on the table and we can actually move towards peace for everybody. Again, political violence, religious violence, none of it's okay, and everyone just needs to take a chill pill.
Well, I want to thank you both for participating today. We've had some very hard-hitting topics, and there was nice, strong, passionate debate on both sides. And I want to thank you both for being here, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week for Montgomery County's hardest-hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.